A lot is going on in the country. Voter intimidation, President Trump recovering from COVID, and holding rallies at the White House. And yes, white supremacists planning to kidnap the governor of Michigan. What is going on? But on a good note, on the campus of Norfolk State University, just last week, the Center for African American Public Policy hosted the second U.S. Senate debate between U.S. Senator Mark Warner and his challenger. For those that tuned in, online, on TV, or here on WNSB, we want to thank you. It was an overwhelming success with over 100,000 views so far. That's right. Behold the green and gold. But that's not the only congressional race in Virginia. We've got Congresswoman Elaine Luria on the ballot representing the 2nd Congressional District here in Virginia Beach. We talked with her recently this week to get her thoughts on what's going on in the world, in Hampton Roads, and her plan for this area and the African American community if reelected. This is State of the Water, and I'm your host, award-winning Dr. Eric Claville. But first, let's hear what the Congresswoman has to say. Welcome to State of the Water. This particular day, we have Congresswoman Elaine Luria representing the 2nd Congressional District here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Congresswoman, how are you today?
I am great. Thank you so much, Dr. Claville, for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us here on this very important program. And not just program, but it's also a very important time. It's election time. And we know that the country now is caught up in the 2020 presidential election. But we also have a lot of local races and statewide races on the ballot, and yours is one of them.
Yes, it is.
Tell us how you've enjoyed representing the people of the 2nd Congressional District here in the Commonwealth.
Well, this has truly been the honor of my lifetime to serve in this capacity. I had the opportunity to serve in uniform in the Navy for 20 years. Before this, as a surface warfare officer and a nuclear engineer. So basically, I drove ships, I operated nuclear reactors on aircraft carriers, and commanded a combat unit of 400 sailors. So that was just a great, opportunity I had to serve our country, and I feel like this is an opportunity to continue to serve in a different capacity. And folks, ask a lot of times, that sounds very technical, operating nuclear reactors and weapons systems and those kind of things on ships. But the truth is there's so many similarities between, being an officer, a leader in the Navy, and what I do as a representative. There are a lot of very technical aspects to the job, but, the part that was the most important was the people. And you can't get your mission done if you don't take care of the people. And so, I looked at my job as a leader in the Navy to create an environment where the people who worked for me could succeed. And the way I look at my job as a representative is to create an environment where, everyone in our community can succeed. They have equal opportunity to succeed, get a good education, access to quality, affordable health care and housing, and, a clean environment. There's just so many things that we work on in Congress that impact people's daily lives. And so, I really look at a lot of similarities between my previous career and my job today.
Congresswoman, from one veteran to another, thank you for your service. And
you too.
And the military has served as a catalyst for progress in our country, especially on race relations and now gender relations. And just to give our citizens of our country an opportunity not to just serve, but an opportunity to gain those leadership skills, as you just stated, an opportunity to work in a team, and an opportunity to contribute to society once we enter back into society from our service. And with that being the case, you've shown that from coming out of the military ranks as an officer and now serving in Congress. There are many veterans in our area. How is it that you're protecting our veterans and helping them with the opportunity once they transition back into society?
Well, this is a great question because actually both committees I serve on in Congress are directly related to veterans and the veteran transition.
Wonderful.
I serve on the Armed Services Committee on Military Personnel. So that's the DOD side of it, before service members separate. And I serve on Veterans Affairs on the Economic Opportunity Subcommittee, which includes the transition assistance, the GI Bill, VA home loans, a lot of the programs that are not healthcare related that serve veterans. And I'm one of a few members who serve on both of those committees. So I think it's really good, especially in an area where we have so many veterans transition every year from the military back to the civilian community, to have the opportunity to influence policy related to that. both on the DoD side as well as after veterans separate. And, there's a lot of programs out there for veterans. I think that there's so many organizations, who want to help veterans in their transition process. Sometimes it's an overload of information that's available to people. And, we, through Congress, do have the ability to streamline those requirements and resources so that they can get all the great information that they need, both about their DoD and VA benefits, as well as the specific training and briefings that come from the Department of Labor. And we really enjoy the opportunity to work with a lot of veteran service organizations to help them, be able to work with and contact veterans. And, just as our congressional office as well, one of the things that we do is help with constituent services. So, we are on the standby to help veterans anytime that they need help with the VA. And, we have an office on the south side in Virginia Beach, on the Eastern Shore and Olney, and also in York County. So if it's okay, I can give the number.
Yes,
if any listeners might have a question as a veteran or otherwise, if they want to reach out to us, it's 757-364-7650. That's 364-7650. So that's the way to contact our team. And we can help out with people having issues or concerns about the VA or who want connections to any of the other resources that are available to veterans.
That's absolutely wonderful. I know that Senator Warner and, of course, Senator Kane, who also has a son that's serving currently, they put forth a bill to help with veteran transition because of the epidemic of veteran suicides in our country. So it's so good to know that we do have not just representatives that care about our soldiers, but know what it's like firsthand, right? And these resources that you're giving. So can you give that number one more time for our veterans so that they can contact your office in the event they have a question?
Of course. So it's 757-364-7650. And it's not just for veterans, but, anyone in the community who has concerns or any sort of issues dealing with a federal agency, if that's Social Security, Medicare, VA benefits, immigration issues, federal retirement issues, just any federal agency that you have a question or potentially, have had trouble with some red tape getting an answer, we can certainly reach out and help on your behalf.
Awesome. Congresswoman, I want to segue into your reelection campaign and also your platform. What are some of the areas that you're focusing on that you will let the people of the Commonwealth and the 2nd Congressional District know once reelection is done, if you're reelected, you're going to jump full speed ahead on these particular issues?
Well, I think first and foremost for everyone right now is how we're going to deal with COVID. There's both the public health crisis aspect of it, the fact that we need to provide the resources to develop and test and distribute a safe vaccine, as well as continue to support our communities with the challenges of COVID, whether that be for education or our healthcare workers or providing PPE or testing, tracing, all of the things that we need to do on the public health front related to COVID. So I'm committed to, continuing to work to make sure that our communities have those resources. And that also goes as well as help for our state and local governments. We were able to, through the CARES Act, provide funding for state and local governments. But, the significant, loss of revenue and challenges within our local governments to continue the services that they provide to the community, it's very important that we continue to push and, have been part of the negotiations on a bipartisan basis through a caucus I'm part of called the Problem Solvers Caucus. And it's good to know that at least right now we're back at the table and working to try to get another COVID relief package. And, that has also really impacted small businesses and have worked with the Payroll Protection Program and the SBA programs. Those are called EIDL loans, put together a small business hotline and tried to help as many small businesses as we could across the community. And, we want to make sure that these resources are out there, but they can reach everyone. And we know that, sometimes there's challenges for smaller businesses, rural businesses, minority businesses to be able to connect with and have some of these resources. So it was really a priority of mine to make sure that when we provided the PPP funding, that there was funding set aside for those types of businesses to make sure that it could reach down to, everyone in the community who could take advantage of it. And, I have heard from local business owners that was still a challenge for some people. And, I also reached out to try to leverage the SBA to give us all of the data because they put out data, only about loans that were over $150,000. Well, 80% of the loans were actually less than that value. And without the data about who got those loans, where they were, what types of businesses they were, demographic data about minority and women-owned businesses, it's really hard for us to be able to quantify, like, did we reach everyone that needed it? And I'm fairly certain that, we still have people to reach. And some of that CARES Act funding that, is also going to state and local governments. The governor has put that out to our localities, our cities, and our counties. And fortunately, there are additional, loans and grants available through the Commonwealth in a lot of our communities. And, we're just working to try to continue to reach as many people as possible with that, as well as programs for housing assistance and helping our local schools. So, COVID just reaches so many aspects of our lives right now that I think, for quite a while, we'll need to continue to address the issues surrounding this pandemic. Go ahead.
If I could, you mentioned COVID, and one major issue that I think all of us have, and the general public, is the messaging coming out of Washington and our health experts on COVID, how to protect yourself. How deadly is this disease? With the president himself not wearing a mask and unfortunately contracting COVID and holding these large rallies, what is the danger of these conflicting messages to the public as it relates to COVID, and how we get our nation back running and protect ourselves?
Yes, well, first, my thoughts and prayers are with the president and the first lady, as well as, everyone else across our country who has contracted COVID, and especially those families who've lost a loved one due to COVID. I mean, the numbers are staggering. When Vice President Biden mentioned in the debate that in the African-American communities, 1 out of every 1,000 people has been impacted by COVID. It's just shocking, kind of the disparity and how this touches different parts of our communities. And the Latinx or Hispanic community as well has significantly higher rates than the overall population. And, when we look at our leaders, I think our leaders really need to set the example. Wearing a mask is to protect other people. And, I think that it has just been disappointing from the top and, throughout the White House and this administration. The latest number I saw was over 30 people who work within the White House and close to the president have contracted COVID. And, the leader of our country needs to set the example, and I feel like that has been missing. And it's just been confusing, the information that has come out. Obviously during a health crisis that we've never seen before, we're going to learn new things as time goes along. But, once we determine that this was airborne, that a mask would help protect other people, help protect you from getting the virus, it's not a lot to ask to just wear a mask in public in order to help stop the spread. And so, like you said, we're going into election season. It's just over 20 days away. And, I think it's very important when we get our ballots and we go vote to think about, the kind of leadership that we want on a very difficult issue like this.
Right. So you mentioned it is a very difficult issue, and it's something that a lot of people are concerned about, but life does go on. And with that being the case, we know that the economy and jobs are part of that. What is your outlook and what is your platform in order to continue to grow jobs here in the Hampton Roads area, more specifically your congressional district and the African-American community?
Yes, well, we are, I talked a lot about the health aspect of this, and, we're also having, an economic recovery from this. And if you look at the different things that, really are significant factors in our local economy, Navy and DOD is directly 42% of the economy. And, although listeners might be listening who don't, specifically work in that industry, it's such a significant part of our economy that making sure that we have a strong military presence here in Hampton Roads, really sustains our broader economy overall. And so I'm on the Armed Services Committee. I serve as the vice chair on the Sea Power Subcommittee. And if you think about the fact that we are the region that builds all of the aircraft carriers, half of the submarines, and 1/4 of all shipbuilding and repair that happens in the entire country, is here in Virginia. And on top of that, we have the Port of Virginia. So 1 out of every 9 jobs in the Commonwealth is either directly or indirectly related to the port. Right. I think that these are very important issues that we need to, from a federal level, make sure that we have the resources, coming in, for our Navy presence in the region, not only for national defense reasons, but for our local economy, as well as, to support the port. We're working with the Army Corps about the deeper, wider, safer. So widening our channel will be the first port on the East Coast to take the newest, really deep draft vessels when they dredge to 55 feet And so those are some major federal level, economic things directed towards the region. There are a lot of, I spent a lot of time going around to small businesses and talking to small business owners, about their challenges. And I was a small business owner myself, up until just relatively recently. So, I know how that responsibility is of having to, make payroll, people who depend on you. You feel like your employees are, really part of your family, and that this is a trying time for those businesses, to try to get through. I think that we need to look at, what we can do to help those businesses grow and thrive, and also what we can do for families. And, there are people in our community who are struggling,
Yes.
who are working 2, sometimes 3 jobs for very low wages. And if you think about other things in our region, housing is so expensive. We don't have a $15 minimum wage, but even if we did, if you think about somebody working full-time at $15 an hour, that's $600 a week, $2,400 a month.
Yeah.
But the average 2-bedroom house or apartment to rent in our region is $1,200. So we're in a situation where, even if someone was working full-time with very good wages, they would be spending half of their pre-tax incomes just to put a roof over their heads. So, it's incredibly challenging, and we need to continue to work, and, Bobby Scott led the way on this to help raise the minimum wage. But, above and beyond that, we want people to be able to get the skills and the education to have jobs that, pay even better than a minimum wage. And, I think that we need to look at ways that we can, grow industry in our region. We have a huge opportunity here for offshore wind. But right now, it's the first project in federal waters that's being developed. Bureau of Ocean Energy Management has set aside 144,000 acres off of our coast, and Dominion and Ørsted are building those first wind turbines off the coast. So we have an opportunity to dramatically expand that, not only off of Virginia, but the whole mid-Atlantic, because of our port, because of our industrial base. And there are thousands of jobs in manufacturing and installing and maintaining the wind turbines and all of the industries that support all of that. That could come to this region, and so we really need to look at the ways that we can help grow that industry here. And I work very closely with Congressman Bobby Scott, and he's the chair of Education and Labor, so he is always working on those workforce development issues, and how we can help grow more good, well-paying jobs in our region.
And that takes me to education. As a matter of fact, I attended in part a town hall online with Congressman Scott on yesterday. With the current candidate for the 5th Congressional District, Dr. Cameron Webb, who, when we talked about the economy, it was about the area being too dependent upon defense and how diversified in those areas that you mentioned, clean energy, also the areas of STEM. And that leads us to not just jobs of the future, but education. And in educating our kids for the jobs of the future, but still being well-rounded, getting the classical liberal arts, right? So how would you approach retooling or giving our K through 12 schools the resources in order to start educating and driving our kids toward those job-ready majors and job training?
I think that's very important that, we make sure that students, at the secondary level, have the opportunity to be exposed to all of the type of career fields that are out there. Because, every student might not want to go to college, or, their interests might lead them in a direction where they have skills that they can apply, whether it be in, the technology, computer science, or cyber arena, where there are just tons of jobs, looking to fill thousands of those jobs across the Commonwealth, or whether it's more hands-on technical trade skills. And I think that, from the federal level, being able to help our school systems, have the resources to be able to provide, a wide range of opportunities for our students. So from the federal level, the main role of the federal government in education is to ensure that every student has equal access to a quality education, regardless of, zip code, economic background, racial background, or any sort of disability that they might experience as well. And, one of the things that, has been very challenging for our localities, and sometimes, makes them really struggle to have, those extra programs that go the extra mile to give people that career training, is the fact that, there's a lot of federal mandates that are not fully funded. The Individuals with Disability and Education Act it lays out the requirements for local school, state and local, state government and local school systems to accommodate the students with disabilities. And it's a huge price tag. So the federal government requires it, but they don't pay for it.
Right.
So I think that fully funding the IDEA, or the Individuals with Disabilities and Education Act, is one of the steps that we can take, because if we can take that burden off of, our state governments and our local school systems, to be able to have the resources to fix the infrastructure in their crumbling school buildings, but also provide more of these diverse opportunities for students to get skills, to have, good jobs. That's very important. And technical and skills training is very important as well. Being on the Armed Services Committee, very engaged with our local ship repair associations, and, trying to understand kind of like what the job market here needs and what kind of resources can help, fill those jobs within our industrial base, and, how we can fit in to our local school systems, both the high schools, trade programs through labor unions, as well as our, community college system to meet the demands of the industry in the region.
You mentioned resources, and one thing that was also discussed now, not just in that town hall I attended with Congressman Scott, but across school districts and concerns with parents, is the access to broadband.
Yes.
And now we're in a time period where, because of the pandemic, we're having to, everyone is having to go to Zoom Academy, or Zoom High School, Zoom Middle School, or Zoom Elementary School, right? And every parent is the chief executive officer of their learning academy. So, but a lot of students don't have access to that broadband. Even if they have a signal, it's not as strong, especially in poor areas, African-American areas, and other minority areas. Even some parents are having to go to the local McDonald's so their kid can get a stronger signal. And school systems are helping, trying to take buses and park them close to certain housing areas and so forth. But here in Hampton Roads, with us having so much and being forward thinking, especially on the military side and defense, how is it that we can actually drive broadband and in this area and increase our access for all?
Well, yes. This is a problem, like you said, in some of our urban communities, as well as in the rural areas. In Northampton, Accomack counties, the areas on the Eastern Shore,
yes.
There just isn't access to rural broadband. And so that's something that I've been, working very hard on, making sure that we can get resources towards rural broadband, into our communities. And, I just last week introduced another bill. It's my 19th bill that I've introduced. It's bipartisan. It really helps improve access to broadband for low-income families. There's actually a program out there for SNAP recipients to have access to affordable broadband, but it is very underutilized. And the legislation that I've introduced has tried to do a survey of those people who receive SNAP benefits to determine if they're utilizing the program, and to help get them more information on how to access the low cost access to broadband connections. But, you're also talking about infrastructure issues within, our cities or our rural areas to make sure that, there is the connectivity point. And, when we think about infrastructure, for a long time, everybody's infrastructure. That's roads, that's bridges, that's tunnels, that's airports, that's rail. But when we talk about infrastructure today, it includes broadband.
That's right.
It's just like the point in time when we decided that every house in this nation needed electricity. Every house needs access to broadband today. So when we look at infrastructure, we need to look at it that way. We, in the House, recently passed a very large infrastructure package, and continue to push on, getting those things through the Senate and signed into law to make sure that we can make those investments, because, truly having that connection today is really akin to, having equal opportunity to, succeed and get your education and connect with all the resources that you need.
No, look, you're exactly right. As a matter of fact, we experienced the Industrial Revolution here, of course, in America, which really drove industry. It drove innovation, and pretty much what we're experiencing and got the world going in a way where America really thrived, from agricultural during the time of the first founding into the Industrial Revolution, the engine, of course, the car and the like. But now we're in the fourth industrial revolution, which you mentioned. Infrastructure deals with technology. So we understand that there is an infrastructure discussion on Capitol Hill, along with, I know, stimulus bills of trillions of dollars that are coming from the federal government. Where does Hampton Roads stand in the infrastructure bill, and what do we stand to gain? And what is your role in helping to push and advance that infrastructure bill?
Well, we recently passed an infrastructure bill, H.R. 2. So if you look at the bills, the single-digit bills in each Congress, those are the biggest priority bills.
Right.
And so we, recently passed that bill in the House. I co-sponsored it, and I, voted to support it. I think, it's kind of the way the cycle goes with elections and, this Congress and this administration coming to an end, although, early on in this administration, there was a lot of enthusiasm for an infrastructure package. It seems like, at this point, we're going to have to work hard in the next Congress to make that happen. But, I see investing in infrastructure also as a way forward to get the economy back on track. After the COVID crisis, to invest in our infrastructure. And expansion of the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel, the groundbreaking for that will be coming up at the end of this month. The Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel expansion is already ongoing, and the widening of I-64 on the peninsula. But, all of us who sit in traffic around here know that there's, still continued work to be done. And within the Hampton Roads region, we've instituted quite a while back now the, regional gas tax, which, fortunately can, help supplement other funding, really for those types of infrastructure projects. And that said, a lot of people, myself included, before I came to Congress, had the idea that the federal interstate highway program was funded by the federal government. But the truth of it is, that there's a lot of responsibility at the state level and the local level to be able to make these projects come to fruition. So, we have our commitment at the federal level, and I know we work, very closely with VDOT on their priorities for our region. And like I said, there's quite a few large projects ongoing, but, some other things that are a big problem in transportation and infrastructure around here is sea level rise and the current flooding.
Right.
And all of us know those typical roads to avoid when it's raining at high tide. And so, there's a lot of work that needs to be done on that infrastructure. And, within the Armed Services Committee, I have, pushed two different initiatives. One is the Defense Community Infrastructure Project, and that provided funding for the first time this year to help, installations outside help out the communities outside the fence line with some of those critical, mitigation projects. Right. And then defense access roads as well as another program. So our region, can work through a lot of cooperative ways to help improve infrastructure. But, sea level rise, we need to address that in a very big way for the long term. That's going to be something very important for our region in the future decades.
It is. As a matter of fact, I read a study several years ago through the Department of Defense, which labeled sea level rise and the environmental change as one of the biggest threats, if not the biggest threat to our security across the world. And
and out of the 10 bases in the country that they mentioned, 2 are right here.
Exactly.
Yes.
So with us having the largest naval base in the world here in Norfolk, I mean, that's very important, very critical. And I think that's something that can really drive with the infrastructure bill passing. Hopefully, we're keeping our fingers crossed with the next Congress, we can get it passed and really get to work the people here in Hampton Roads and really address those important issues. But in our final moments, Congresswoman, we want to talk about the big issue of the day, and that's voter protection and having our free and fair election. We know one thing that makes America great as it relates to our democracy is one man, one vote, or one person, one vote. And the ability to elect the representative of your choice to represent your area. You've been fortunate enough to be chosen to represent the people of the 2nd Congressional District here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and you're vying for that opportunity again. Tell us how we as citizens of the Commonwealth can feel about the protection of our ballot, and especially in light of what's going on with the post office and the misinformation that's coming from the White House and all of the areas on social media and the like.
Well, I think that there's several aspects, about the safety of elections, going back to the 2016 election and the question of, Russian interference in our political process. And, are there other malign actors who are continuing to, agitate or provide, information that could potentially influence or suppress the vote. So that is definitely a concern again during this election cycle. And then, the safety and the integrity of the election process itself. We here in Virginia a few years ago now went back to paper ballots. So,
yes.
I think that provides a good level of confidence that, people's votes are, recorded and traced. And it traced in the sense that, if you move to recount the votes, there are physical ballots and that process can take place. And we've expanded access to voting in Virginia this year. Even before the pandemic was a thing that we knew about, the General Assembly had passed legislation to allow absentee voting with no excuse, which means, before you had to say, you were either working or traveling or had an illness, you had to give a reason and attest to it that you were not able to vote on Election Day. But now we have allowed everyone to vote either using an absentee ballot, which they can request to have sent to them and they can send back in, or drop off at a drop box, which that's something the General Assembly just put into place during the most recent special session.
Yes.
And the fact that the people are able already now to vote at their local registrar's office, and starting next week and the week after that, localities have different times and locations, but there will be even more remote polling locations that will also be open on a couple Saturdays as well before Election Day. So there are lots of opportunities for people to be able to, make their voice heard and go vote early, either in person or by sending a ballot in by mail or going on Election Day. A lot of resources have been put into making the polls safe from a health perspective on Election Day, whether that's PPE, hand sanitizer, social distancing, all kinds of practices in place to protect people's health, both people voting and the people working at the polls, so that everyone can feel comfortable using one of those methods to be able to vote on Election Day.
In the words of the late, great Johnny Lewis, the vote is the most powerful tool in our democracy, nonviolent tool in our democracy. Vote, register to vote, vote, and vote often. Congresswoman Elaine Luria, we thank you for joining us here on State of the Water at Norfolk State University. Good luck to you in the election, and hopefully we'll see you again.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Claville. It was a pleasure to be here, and just remind everybody that they have one more day. October 13th is the deadline to register. Yes. So if people are listening and they have not registered to vote, they still have one more day to do that, and make sure that, you request your ballot or go early or go on Election Day, because like you said, and like John Lewis said, the vote is your voice.
That's it. And where can the voters and our listeners find out more about you?
So my website for my campaign is Elaine for Congress, spelled out FOR, ElaineForCongress.com. And I also mentioned as well, if people would like resources directly from our official website or our official office, luria.house.gov, G-O-V. And you can sign up there for a frequent newsletter. We put out all the information about the bills we're supporting, important information about the CARES Act and other things like that. And would love to connect with you through that website. And people can also go there if they want tours of the Capitol or the White House. Or one thing I really want to put out is this is the season for applications for the nomination process for the service academies,
yes.
West Point, Annapolis, the Air Force Academy. And we are really looking for, a lot of, qualified applicants here in the region who want to pursue a career of service as officers in the military. So you can also go there to find out more about that opportunity.
Thank you, Congresswoman, and good luck in the election.
Thank you so much.
757-823-9110. That's 757-823-9110. We want to know your thoughts. This is State of the Water, and I'm your host, award-winning Dr. Eric Claville. What do you have to say about the interview with Congresswoman Elaine Luria? What about the jobs and voter protection? Do you feel safe with your vote? 757-823-9110. We're here to talk about these very important issues, and not only the interview with Congresswoman Elaine Luria, but also about voting. Now, here on State of the Water, we talk about current issues, things that are happening in our world right now. And listen, this week has been a one for the record books. We've got the intimidation of voting. We've got the President Trump, recovering from COVID and having rallies at his White House. We've got the debates the Pence-Harris debate, and also the canceled Trump-Biden debate. Not only that, we've got white supremacists wanting to kidnap governors and storm the Capitol. And to top it all off, we've got an officer that killed George Floyd that got released from prison and able to lead a state for, quote unquote, his safety. I can't make this stuff up, but we're here to talk about it here on Stay the Water. 757-823-9110. That's 757-823-9110. We want you to call in to know what your thoughts are. What do you feel about voting? Have you voted yet? And if you voted, how have you voted, if you'd like to tell us and why? And are you worried about voter intimidation? You know, just not too long ago when early voting started here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, you know, there were reports of Trump supporters going to the clerk of court's office and intimidating voters that were going in. And this intimidation led to some voters asking to be escorted out because they feared for their safety. Now, mind you, the Trump supporters, they were 100 feet from the polls. But this caravan was led by a Republican chair for that particular area. And they led a caravan for people coming in order to intimidate voters that were going in to vote. Is this just a recap of or the same thing that happened before during the time of African Americans trying to vote? Is this a situation where now it's the new Ku Klux Klan that's coming to intimidate African American voters and voters that are going to vote for candidates that really don't believe on the side of the white supremacists, right? You know, this is something that we really have to pay attention to, because if we don't pay attention to it now, you know, who knows what's going to happen in the future. You know, we have to make sure that every vote counts, that every vote is protected. And for us to ignore this and sweep it under the rug, I think is a big mistake. You know, we've seen it happen before. I mean, so what should we actually do, you know, as it relates to this voter intimidation? Do we need officers at the polls? You know, is this something coming down from the Trump administration? You know, what's really the policy as it relates to protecting our voters? So again, are you worried about your vote when you go to the polls? Have you voted early? You know, we want to know what you think. Right now, we have a caller on the line. Caller, welcome to Stay the Water. What's on your mind?
Yes, I heard the interview with Elaine Luria. Sounds like she's pretty up on what's going on. But as I look at us talking about the racial issues, I see all of the things that our forefathers fought for, you know, voting and things of that nature, where that's an issue right now. And
Right.
That's why it's so important to go out there and vote, because they wouldn't be fighting us, trying to get us not to vote if it wasn't important, if it wasn't going to make a difference. So that's about all the fight that we have in us right now. But it's unbelievable to see what they will allow white Americans to do. There's no way President Obama would have gotten away with what Trump is getting away with. There's no way that a black officer would have been released from prison because of his protection. None of these things would have happened. And so it's very evident how racially divided this country is, and how the only power that we have is in the power of the vote.
Caller, I want to piggyback on something that you said, and we're going to talk about this in the last part of the show. But how did you feel when you heard the news that the officer that killed George Floyd, that murdered him, really, right there for the world to see, was released on bond and was able to leave the state with the murder charge hanging around his neck, and no pun intended for that, but hanging on him for his safety?
Correct. They have prisoners in there that, you know, are at risk. Their safety is at risk. But this man killed the very person that we're sitting out here protesting about, everything that we're talking about. That just goes to show they still have the power, and they will utilize it to their advantage. And it's just unbelievable. I was just hurt to see that they let him go, and would not be surprised now if, he got off. And that's why we don't trust the police. That's why we don't, call on them for help, and we try to handle things in our own way a lot of times. But this is just, where America is speaking, and Trump just gave them the avenue to go forth.
Well, caller, before we go, I want to ask, have you voted yet?
No, but I plan to this week. I'm going to go and vote early.
Thank you so much. When you go vote, make sure you take someone with you as well. Thank you for calling Save the Water.
Thank you.
Well, as you can see from the caller, she's concerned about what's happening in America. Are we going back? She talked about our forefathers fighting for our right to vote. In some of the dying words of the late, great Johnny Lewis, he talked about our vote being the most powerful tool we have, nonviolent tool in a democracy. But we see that through policies coming through the White House, the ignoring of intimidation on the local level, that we see that a lot of individuals, especially African-American individuals that vote more Democratic than the other side, than Republican, their votes are being cast away. They're being intimidated from going to the polls. Misinformation is out there to cause individuals not to vote, not to register. And I want to make a statement about misinformation. Now we don't see, guns being fired and we don't see people hanging from trees as we did very early on, unfortunately, in our country with lynchings. But we see now through technology, misinformation spreading like a wildfire throughout the world about voting, about other issues as relates to race and also riots and things of that nature. And we know, from the report of FBI during the 2016 election that Russia was involved in this. But now we see it happening again. Individuals are now wondering, is my vote going to count? Should I vote by mail? Should I vote absentee? Should I vote on the day? Well, one thing I can tell you is that you can go now to your clerk of court's website, wherever city you're in, whether you're here in Norfolk, whether you're here in Virginia Beach, whether you're here on the peninsula, wherever you are. And you can get that information directly from your clerk of court's office. You have until October 13th to register to vote. Until October 13th to register to vote, to ensure that your voice is heard through your vote. So make sure that you make time out to do so. You can even register online. But again, I urge you to get that information directly from the clerk's office. Get that information from your voter registration office in your city here in Norfolk, in Virginia Beach, on the peninsula, wherever you are, in order to learn how to register to vote and then to determine how you want to vote. Okay, we have many ways for you to vote to make sure that your voice is heard. But the vote, again, is the most powerful tool that we have in our democracy. So make sure that your voice is heard. Vote, 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 vote early, and vote often. But now we take a look at President Trump. President Trump himself contracted COVID. I know a lot of persons are saying that, of course, they wish the president well, and we don't want anyone to die from this disease. But we've had over 200,000 people die from this disease, die from this pandemic, which scientists say is avoidable if we social distance, if we wash our hands, if we wear our masks, if we stay out of large crowds. But we see the president of the United States not only contracted COVID, but within 24 hours after being in the hospital, he gets into a vehicle that's sealed with Secret Service agents riding around, waving at his supporters. Now, keep in mind, those vehicles are not only bulletproof, but they're airtight to protect from, biological weapons, chemical attacks, and things of that nature. So was that responsible or irresponsible on the president's part to put his Secret Service and other people in danger for political points? Some believe it was a courageous act. Some believe that it was definitely putting those people in danger. But whatever the case may be, we know that COVID is a very serious disease, but not just the president, but his wife and 34 other individuals in the White House have contracted COVID. But, you would think that the president would learn and say, hey, maybe we should wear a mask more often. Maybe we should do it all the time. Maybe the scientists are right? Dr. Fauci has decades of experience doing this. The Centers for Disease Control have a lot of information, a lot of data, a lot of experience doing this. Even President Obama created the infectious disease and the pandemic office within the White House in order to battle against this after he battled SARS, which came over and affected some cities in America, but it didn't spread throughout the United States. But just this past week, the president held a rally on the lawn of the White House with African-American and Latino and people of color supporters for the police. Now, some people had masks. Temperatures were checked, of course, and he said when they came in, but people were sandwiched together, shoulder to shoulder. And a lot of people did not have masks on. So is this something that's continuing? Did the president learn from this? If this is the message that's coming from the highest office of the land, what message are we sending to America, to the people, and more specifically, what message are we sending to the world? Is America a place of freedom no matter what, or is it a place of misinformation, right? But again, we have to take this pandemic serious. We're going to get through it. We are going to get through it, but we have to do our part. We have to wear our masks. We have to social distance. We have to ensure that we're protecting our neighbors, our brothers, our sisters, everyone in our house, and of course, our elderly, our senior citizens. Make sure that we're protecting them by doing our part. But shouldn't the president be doing his part as well? This is, again, something that we have to address, something we have to be cognizant of, and especially on the day of voting. Be prepared. If you're going to go vote on the day of the election, be prepared, bring your mask, be prepared to social distance, be prepared, to wait whatever time it takes for you to vote. But again, we have to be prepared as Americans. But not just voting and the voter intimidation that we experience during the week, the various stories, and then Trump contracting COVID-19 and holding a rally at the White House even after contracting it. But we have a recap of the debates. Now, as I mentioned at the top of the hour, this is political season. Here last weekend on the campus of Norfolk State University, the Center for African American Public Policy hosted, along with its debate partners, a U.S. senatorial debate for the first time in its 85-year history for a major statewide office for Congress, and between Senator Mark Warner and his challenger, Dr. Daniel Gabe, which was a phenomenal, overwhelming success. Over 100,000 views online on our media partner, Wavy TV 10, their affiliate in Richmond and across the Commonwealth, and also here on WNSB. Over 100,000 views. Actually, the number is 110,000, and we're still getting statistics from it. But again, it was a phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal success. So for those that watched and tuned in, thank you. And continue, because here at Norfolk State University, continue to behold. We're continuing to move forward and move upward to make the Spartan Nation proud. But we also had another debate, the Pence-Harris debate. Now, there was a lot of information, a lot of Twitter fire and social media fire after that debate. But this was the only vice presidential debate of this particular season. And many believe that it was one of the most important debates, because here you have President Trump and former Vice President Joe Biden, two of the oldest candidates for office of president in the history of the United States. We're also in the middle of a pandemic that is taking individuals' lives at a very high rate, especially if you're of a certain age and if you have certain indicators. So this vice presidential debate showed America which candidate, if they are elected, could step in on the next day in the event that something happens to the president of the United States. It showed two very different styles of management, two different styles of handling issues. And many people believe that Senator Harris won that debate. They believe that She showed poise, even though she was constantly interrupted by Vice President Pence. Many people believe that she stayed the course in helping to move forward the agenda and the platform of the Biden-Harris ticket. But then some people also believe that Vice President Pence didn't say anything to really stir the boat, to rock the boat of President Trump, to really keep the supporters locked in, to say that we're going to continue to toe the line that we're towing. But what are your thoughts about that debate? 757-823-9110. 757-823-9110. What was your thoughts of the Pence-Harris debate? Do you believe that either could be the next president of the United States? And what type of president would they make if they were president of the United States? You know, and then from that debate, there were a lot of hard questions asked. There were questions asked about whether the Biden ticket would actually move to pack the court, to increase the number of justices for the U.S. Supreme Court. And on Pence's side, the question was, should we wait? Should we wait until the next president is chosen in order for the Senate to confirm the next nominee? Very similar to what Mitch McConnell did during the time period of President Obama when he put Merrick Garland up in 2016. They were saying, no, we're going to wait because the next president should choose. Matter of fact, they didn't even take any meetings, you know, with President Obama's nominee. But now the coin is, the ball is on the other side of the court and the coin is flipped. But now we find where, you know, Mitch McConnell is saying, hey, we're going to move forward with this. And Mike Pence is on board with that. You know, is that fair? Is that something that we should say is okay? But let's see what you have to say. We have a caller. Caller, welcome to Stay the Water. What's on your mind?
Well, I was listening to the host, and he posed a question with regard to what our thoughts were as far as the vice presidential debate between Pence and Senator Harris.
Yes.
And I have to say that, no question, Senator Harris, she's an extremely intelligent individual. I loved watching it because, you know, she's a black woman, clearly, but she's representing a whole race of people.
Right.
And one of the things that's important for all of us as people of color is a level of intelligence when we speak. And she did that very clearly. She outshined Vice President Pence, who effectively has done nothing since he's been there. And for him to toe the line with Trump, it's just disgraceful. And he calls himself a Christian, and I don't know whether he is or not, but we judge the trees by the fruit, and the fruit looks pretty rotten.
You know, caller, you mentioned something that a lot of people have talked about, you know, with Vice President Pence wearing his faith on his shoulders.
Right.
And, you know, but supporting a president that has put forth policies that are the opposite of of the faith that he professes.
Absolutely.
What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts about that?
Well, you know, as a Christian, I am a Christian person. Now, none of us are perfect. We get that, and we're not going to be perfect on this side. However, we do understand what the Word of God says if you're reading it. And God is not a liar. He's not a man that he should lie, and he doesn't raise up liars. Okay? So if we are calling ourselves people of God and we're supporting people who follow John 8:44, that's a problem.
Caller, one other issue that they talked about regarding the Supreme Court. Do you believe that the next president should choose the next Supreme Court nominee, or do you think that it's okay what Senator McConnell and the Senate is doing to try to confirm Judge Comey Barrett?
Well, the precedent has already been set by Abraham Lincoln, whatever year he was president. And I think he mentioned in a quote, and I don't know the exact words, but effectively he agreed that the incoming president, and I think it makes much more sense that the incoming president should choose the individual who's going to sit on that seat. It doesn't make sense that, and this is my personal view, that we have a person who has done nothing but lie and outrageously lie this whole time. He's been accused of all sorts of things, and he's also been impeached. In my view, and I'm not a lawyer, but how can an impeached president name someone for the Supreme Court? I don't get it. Actually, I do get it, but that's not it. You're okay?
Well, caller, thank you so much for calling in on Stay in the Water.
You're welcome.
Well, based upon judging from what the caller just stated, this is a very important election, but also a very important look at the vice presidential debate. Again, one of these individuals could become the next president in the event that something happens to the president while in office, or if they run successfully in 2024. But not only the vice presidential debate, but we also have the Trump-Biden debate. Now, President Trump said he wanted to debate in person, but out of an abundance of caution, the Commission on Presidential Debate said, no, we're going to hold this virtual, if you're up to it health-wise, for the safety of not only former Vice President Joe Biden, but also for the safety of the person asking the questions. But the president insisted on being there in person, so they had to cancel the debate. Again, safety first. The president not really understanding the magnitude of this pandemic, even after contracting COVID himself. It boggles the mind. But stay tuned, because we have other debates coming up, and we want to get your thoughts on those debates on future shows. But there are a couple of other things I want to talk about before the end of the show. We only have a few minutes. But one thing that the president has done, he's opened the door. He was given the keys by the Republican Party during the 2008 and Tea Party birther movement as it relates to white supremacy, trying to throw doubt on whether the President Obama, was actually born in America. Many thought that was straight from a racist and white supremacist playbook from days past. But President Trump took those keys and opened the door and opened up and unleashed a barrage and a flood of white supremacist dialogue, white supremacist ideology, and also actions. And speaking of white supremacist actions, just this week, the FBI, on a months-long investigation, arrested and charged 13 individuals who claim to be creating a plan to storm the Capitol and the governor's mansion in Michigan, to kidnap the governor of Michigan, and not just kidnap her, but put her on trial and then execute her because of what she's doing to the state. Listeners, I can't make this up. Where is our country going? And this is just not a one-time thing that the FBI have seen. As a matter of fact, the current FBI director stated that the biggest threat to American security is white supremacists. So the question becomes, what is America going to do about this? What are the people in power going to do? Again, we don't want to go back, to pre-1960s. We don't want to go back to those very shameful days that America looked at a group of people, African Americans and others, and said, you don't matter. But it's a new era where we now will no longer take the lies that were told in history. Now we will start to look to appreciate the contributions of African Americans in society. Now we will start to look and say, yes, Black leadership matters. Yes, Black intellect matters. Yes, Black culture matters. And yes, Black lives do matter. So we have to ensure that whatever we do, we stamp out at every single moment, not just African Americans, but all of America, especially white America. Stamp out racism, stamp out any type of phobia, just based on the belief of somebody's looks and somebody's race that God gave them. Listeners, we thank you for tuning in. This is Stay the Water. I'm your host, award-winning Dr. Eric Claville, and we look for you to tune in every Sunday at 1 o'clock as we bring policymakers, movers, and shakers to you, the listeners of Hampton Roads and beyond, in order to determine what those issues are to you. Tune in. We'll see you next Sunday at State of the Water. Bye-bye.